This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
First off, I'd like to thank each and every one of you. Without you,
Stranger Things video.
We wouldn't be here. Give yourselves a big
Stranger Things video.
Let's go!
Stranger Things video. Stranger Things was a great show, but Stranger Things was also a flawed show, and unique but also repetitive, and moving but overly sentimental, but a lot of different things. Stranger Things could be renamed a lot of things. God, that's bad. And nowhere, I think, though, is that more true than Season 4. Now, I really enjoyed Season 4. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I thought it was terrible, and I knew Season 5 was going to be underwhelming. There is a lot to love about Season 4 that I do want to discuss, but I think out of all of the seasons, it is the best snapshot of everything that's best and worst about the show in one, or at least all of the potential this show veered towards, and then all of that it completely failed to deliver on. I think Season 4 is the best season to sum up everything as a whole, and that's what we're going to do. Because despite all of the aspects I do love, it made a mistake in my mind. You can be the judge, of course. If you want to be the judge, then stick around as we kick this off with the best train in the world. So let's very quickly run through some of the positives here. Obviously we're not going to fit everything in, but I think this season is the most alive Hawkins has felt since Season 1. A big part of what made Stranger Things so initially successful, in my opinion, was how vibrant and immersive the town felt as a place, capturing both the essence of the 80s America, but also providing a lot of different insight and conflict through the different ways people in this town tried to grapple with the disappearance of Will Byers. It was an entire town exploring shared grief, and whilst it's obviously different in Season 4, we do get touches of that kind of thing again. This is the most school as a place has mattered since Season 1. In fact, maybe even more, as we get Eddie and the Hellfire Club representing one aspect of the environment here, and then there's Jason and the basketball team, Max and then Chrissy, all bringing different ingredients to the melting pot, and it's really satisfying just seeing Lucas, for example, trying to navigate the different directions he's getting pulled in, and that's before anything even happens in the story. I won't say it's particularly original to have the cheerleader who feels trapped in social expectation and the metalhead who feels ostracized, and the two of them bonding in the middle, but it's effective nonetheless. It captures the heart of The Breakfast Club and the heart of this show itself, everything it's ever tried to say about misfits finding their place in the world. I think it captures that in a single episode well, then flips it into tragedy when Chrissy dies and Eddie is blamed for it. Really well done, sets up a slow build across this season of the town, ramping up more and more into a frenzy and a satanic panic as more people keep dying in supernatural ways. Again, this is great. This is what I want out of the show. A community that has lots of different moving parts all clashing and coalescing. We get a lot of the police this season appearing baffled by events, trying and failing to keep a lid on things, but with Hopper absent, it makes sense all of the secretive upside down stuff would start spilling out because he was the one who did often keep a lid on things. Then we've got Eddie's uncle representing a silent grief amidst all of this anger and fear that Jason is whipping up, with the town sending them into action, taking it upon himself to be a leader. And I don't know if this is realistic for America or not, but that Jason gives a speech to the community about how their basketball team is going to do this year. To me, this feels like an insane stereotype and a scathing satire of all of the American, we're the best at everything ever, we're gonna show the world, a jock being like a social leader in the environment type mentality.
Think about each and every one of our friends who perished in that fire. What did they die for? For us to lose to some crap school? Let's win this game for them, and that's exactly what we do!
It's very fun, it's very natural how easily that shifts Jason from being someone giving a basketball speech to someone forming a mob to brutalize innocent people. Season 2 and 3 lost some of this, I think, the sense of community. Season 2 was more about the extended family of characters in particular, and Season 3 did bring in Starcourt and the mayor and all of that, but it also felt a bit surreal there. like a playground to chuck stuff about in rather than a world where we can suspend our disbelief to invest in it. You know, to the extent a whole hospital gets smashed up in season 3 and nobody notices, and then all of the chaos where people disappeared and there was a giant meat monster thing and Russians in a secret base, all of that just gets chalked down to an accidental fire, and you think, really? Really no one noticed anything more? Season 4 rectifies that by going, well, here's the community literally splitting apart. You can't cover this up now. All hell is going to break loose next season. You hope. But yeah, without getting to season 5 just yet, that really works here. And it was something I actually think was really effective about season 1 as well, that people don't discuss enough, how more and more of the community do slowly get brought into this world of supernatural events, and how increasingly real all of this stuff starts to feel for them. You know, for most of the first acts, they're all just disparate characters. Then a team starts to begin forming, but where it did still feel mostly otherworldly and a bit removed and more easier to reflect the wish fulfillment of a child just hoping he can keep his friend hidden in a basement. Slowly that peels back more as things become really real, as Brenner literally visits Mike's parents and makes mention to them of a Russian girl, and you think, oh god, this isn't going to stay secret anymore. Season 1 does end with a sense a lot of this stuff might come to light, and it annoys me how they then kind of took a step back after this, and Mike's parents are again oblivious to everything next season, seem to mostly forget about this Russian girl that was mentioned, and remain oblivious all the way up to season 5. But yeah, in season 1, for the last act, this sense of things coming to light worked really, really well. This sense of, oh damn, this is getting real now. It adds an extra layer of weight, and season 4 managed to do the same thing, but on a bigger scale. What else works?
They've all given up their lives, their jobs, their families to come work on this program because they believe in the cause. We call her
Squarespace.
What is it?
It's an all-in-one platform for your website or online business. Yep, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. Not just an all-in-one platform, but the best all-in-one platform to suit all your needs, whatever they may be. Intuitive website designer, linking with business email, loads of different integrations, securing your own unique domain, built-in SEO tools, personalized marketing campaigns, analytics, invoices, booking schedules, contact forms, donations, and a load more stuff. All of it here. I've been building my own website on Squarespace, and this footage is me building it from scratch without need of any tutorials. It's really simple. Add elements, drag and resize everything on a grid system, change the colours, add pictures, a nice contact form, maybe build a shop page so you can sell such things as your new poetry book. Yeah. Thanks to Squarespace, this website is live now, this shop page is live, all set up with very little hassle at all, and I've been getting sales both of my poetry book, as well as commissions for editing work through Squarespace, simple as anything. So, if you want the best domain name at an all-inclusive price, if you want integrated SEO tools, if you want a giant scrolling list of all the things Squarespace offer, then click the link in the description or the pinned comment for a free trial to Squarespace. And if it suits you nicely, then use the code MyLittleFortry to get 10% off purchasing your first domain or website, just like I did. Yep. Squarespace. I love Max's arc this season. She is hands down the best thing about season 4. Billy died, and whilst he was awful to Max, it also leaves her in a very realistic space of feeling guilty for hating him, and for the part of her that always wished he would die, or at least go away, because when he suddenly does, she blames herself, and a part of her feels like she should now die too in order to try and replace him or atone for the loss. Even when she knows that's unfair, it still gnaws at her brain, causes her to isolate herself both emotionally and socially, and leaves her very vulnerable to Vecna and everything he represents here. That is a very real, uncomfortable, raw emotion to be exploring. And then running up the hill becomes a massively iconic moment as the big emotional climax for, I don't know, the first act, I suppose, maybe it's the second, I can't remember when it happens, but it's a massive climax, all perfectly expressing how her friends can help her, can be there for her. She does have value in the world. She doesn't have to be alone. I think the first half of Max's story this season is as perfect as you can hope for. It's easy on retrospect, I think, to turn your nose up at the use of Kate Bush because of the cultural fever it caused. Now that makes the moment seem a bit overplayed, but at the time on the first watch this was really effective and does still work really well. I'm glad also to see Eleven struggling at the start of this season to fit in. We've needed this. So much of this story has had the conflict of, can this poor traumatized girl learn to actually belong in the world? Can she find a place that fits her? Can she carve out an actual life and have an actual childhood to be an ordinary person? That question has been hanging in the air a lot, so the Duffer Brothers take away her powers and stick her in a new school, and Eleven discovers it's really hard. Even when there's not world-ending threats getting in the way, it is really, really hard. School is a minefield, and I feel for her massively. This is a necessary beat in a story for what you hope is the eventual overall arc, that she will come to find a place to belong. That the story overall will be telling us, for any of us who feel out of place, or different, or have harrowing pasts we're trying to move on from, we too can find our place, even if it's really difficult. That's where you hope it's going. I do also like Eleven's arc with an Nina project as well, though we're learning more about her past, about the origins of a lot of dangers. We see more of Brenna's flawed behaviours and how cruel it was. The villain of the season gets an effective reveal that neatly ties all the separate threads together this season in one dramatic moment, all while there's the danger of the military hunting Eleven. Eleven bringing down the helicopter is a big cinematic moment, but it's also emotionally cathartic, because like Eleven, we've felt so much anger for so many seasons now at the ways the world and the government just refuse to let this girl be, let her live a life. This is a great moment for that rage to come out, and also to know it will all likely have consequences. Brenna and Owens represent two sides of an interesting dilemma that also has consequences. Either Eleven leaves now to save her friends, only she might not be strong enough to win the fight, or she stays longer to train more, but it might become too late to save her friends once she does go. Out of the two, she picks option one, and yeah, she does save her friends, but she also effectively loses as well. There's all of the stuff about Eleven worrying she might be the monster, and then that Brenna was the monster, and then Vecna flipping that idea on its head at the end. It's a little heavy-handed, that, but it's still a decent emotional arc nonetheless. It's worth exploring. I like when Eleven gets to be the emotional core of a season. What else can I say? Eddie is a great character. It's easy how his face has been plastered everywhere to forget that Joseph Quinn is a good actor. I think there's a reason his character seemed to catch something in the world and so many people became obsessed with him, and he actually served, I think, to make D&D quite cool. Or at least a mix of Eddie, Critical Role and Baldur's Gate suddenly made D&D a very popular thing, which I still find strange but is really cool. And exemplifying something in the cultural zeitgeist isn't necessarily the mark of a good show, but we should at least acknowledge and admire it. And then I'm just gonna say, I enjoy this season. It is always entertaining at the very least. Sure, I'm not particularly fond of the whole Russian prison plot. I think there's a lot of better things you could do instead, but it's entertaining to watch nonetheless. You know, sure, I'll watch a bunch of people fight a Demogorgon in a prison. Sure, I'll enjoy every moment Enzo has on screen. Maybe not on a rewatch, but on the first time round I did laugh at Murray showcasing all his karate training. I don't think this season is ever not entertaining. I do personally prefer, like, the slower opening episodes of season 2, where it is a bit dull there but has a lot of heart, to this kind of opposite approach where it's less heartful but more of an entertaining circus. It's not my choice, however, a lot of people will feel the reverse, and that's fine. There is a lot to like about it here. There are a lot of good and valid reasons people felt like this season was a return to the best of Stranger Things, because it does capture a lot of those elements again, just on a bigger scale with more stuff as well. However, this is of course only one side of the story. My argument is that this show was dripping with potential. It's never quite then delivered on, and I think nothing sums up that idea better than Season 4's ending with the town being torn into 4 pieces, and then Season 5 just having the floor patched up off screen before we begin. You know, you had the potential to do something absolutely mad there. For this small cozy town we've grown to love since Season 1 to now descend into utter chaos and apocalypse. I can't think of many stories like that. Not where you come to known the town for so long and grown so invested into it, to then see hell unleashed everywhere for an entire season as well. Not just like the final few episodes, the final act of the season, but that being the starting point. That would have made for such a wonderful exploration about community divides and how they develop and how you navigate and overcome cultural clashes and panic and fear on that degree, which are concepts we got hints of in season 1 and in season 4 that now should be taken to an entirely new level. That's the expectation that's been set up, and it's a wonderful concept for a television season, and few shows would have had the budget to pull that off the way Stranger Things could, but it didn't do that. And I get it. I'm quite empathetic to this, actually, because it would be really tricky to start a season at that massive high point and then have to somehow effectively build upwards even higher from there. It would be really, really tricky. So I do get that, but I don't think it would have been impossible. I think it could be done with care, and that is what they set up. That is the expectation we've been given, so it sucks to see them not even try and just kind of fold on it immediately, which is a pattern, I think. Not just in season 5 either, not even just in season 4, for which we're going to provide some examples, but throughout this show. Teetering on the edge of giving us something with massive potential, only to backtrack on all of it at the very last second. You know, I was just praising Eleven's story, wasn't I? But only really for the potential of it, not for the payoff. It is great to see Eleven struggling to find a way to belong. It's what so much of the show has been about. It adds tension and build up for the eventual triumph when we can end this story with Eleven truly finding her place. To whatever extent, you know, and that makes it sound like a very rigid thing, but you know what I mean. She never does, though. In season 5, she either has to literally sacrifice her life for the sake of everyone else, or figuratively do that in the sense she travels to the other part of the world in total secret and she can never contact any of her friends again. Which sucks. It feels like it shoots the main thematic core of this show in the foot at the last moment. The argument the Duffer Brothers give here is that Eleven is like E.T. She is not exactly a character herself, but someone who represents something for the other characters the way E.T. does for... is he called Billy in E.T.? I've forgotten. But the thing is, she's not that. She never was that. Not even in season 1, because there was so much human exploration of this young girl as a person, and when she did disappear at the end of season 1, it was a literal tragedy that she couldn't find a way to exist in the world. The point was that that was an injustice. It left a wound. Not that it was the expected outcome. In fact, almost all of the most emotional, heartfelt aspects of this show have been watching Elle struggle as a human, trying to find her place. Well, that, or Will, also struggling to do the same. So we can't just suddenly pretend that was never a thing in the story. I mean, okay, the Duffer Brothers aren't completely wrong. I think they were a bit confused, because on the one hand, they were always exploring Eleven as a person for a lot of human stuff, but then on the other hand, they do also often just treat her like a plot device, a one-dimensional superhero, or like E.T., and these two different aspects, treating her as human, treating her as a plot device, do tend to feel like a jarring contradiction a lot of the time, which does lead to an unsatisfying ending for Elle in season 5, but also, I think nowhere is that contradiction more apparent than her two different arcs in season 4. Season 5 doesn't show you much of the good stuff of Elle, season 1 doesn't show you much of the bad, season 4 contains both, because here we literally watch the story go, let's try and explore Eleven as a person away from her powers. Forget her powers, who is she as a human? What might she want out of life if the Upside Down and the military weren't around? That's what it starts with, and just as we're beginning to get somewhere with that, suddenly she's thrown in jail, and then Dr. Owens appears and says, I can help you get your powers back so you can become a one-dimensional superhero plot device again. And then we forget all of the initial teen stuff altogether, never really addressed again. We do get a few kind of patch-up moments with Mike, I suppose, but that's not really the core of what's going on for Eleven as a human here. And we never really return to the idea, particularly in season 5, beyond a few couple of lines. As much as I do enjoy the Nina Project stuff in season 4, I think it is well written, but these are two different things the season does with Eleven, and I think they perfectly emphasize the best and the worst of how they write Eleven as a character, and best emphasize why they failed to give her an emotionally and thematically satisfying endpoint. So yeah, to be clear, I'm not saying what they do in season 4 is bad, because there's the expectation we might explore further in season 5. However, the two contrasting qualities of Eleven's arc this season, I think, do exemplify a lot of what does go wrong in the worst seasons. You know, I could also point to season 2 here, arguably, that does the same thing, where we're beginning to explore Eleven's dynamic with Hopper, her feeling trapped. She's at an age where she's very eager to learn about her mum and her past, and just when she's beginning to do some of that, suddenly she's thrown away to a gang of outlaws learning how to use her powers better so she can save the day again. But I'm hoping you can get the point I'm trying to make here now. Can we mention Will? Will is actually in one of my favourite scenes from season 4, which is the heart-to-heart he has with Jonathan that both almost makes it acceptable. Jonathan has done nothing of merit all season by suddenly making that the point. Jonathan apologising to Will for being so absent and so high all summer, and that it's got nothing to do with Will. That's his own troubles, and that he misses when Will used to come to him about his problems. It's a good scene that almost papers over how much of a void his character has been since, like, episode 2 of season 2. And also it offers Will something of a catharsis and an outlet. Will, who has spent the entire season silently breaking apart inside about his sexuality and his feelings for Mike, until Jonathan happens to notice. We get this shot of Jonathan looking through the rearview mirror at Will, leading to this eventual scene where he tells Will, "I will always love you, nothing will ever change that," and he as good as hints that he accepts Will for his sexuality. It's a good scene that harkens back to some of what was best about this show, which was always Jonathan and Will's interactions. Their dynamic in season 1 and the start of season 2 was always one of the highlights with Stranger Things. Added so much extra weight and depth, and was often incredibly sweet. This scene captures some of that again for the first time in ages. However, there are two big problems with it. One is that it sets up the expectation this will indeed be going somewhere. Jonathan, as good as, knows that Will is gay, and Will has feelings for Mike that he is desperate to express, but only Jonathan knows, and even then it only in hints. This is the end point for Will's arc in season 4, so you'd think season 5 would hit the ground running with this. Jonathan would be there to help support Will as he slowly finds himself ready to come out, which would maybe happen before the end of Act 1, and then we have a lot of room in Acts 2 and 3 to explore how Mike feels. Perhaps there are some tensions, perhaps not, but giving us lots of room for Will to really find his confidence and accept his sexuality and truly trust that his friends love him all the same. Instead, season 5 kind of backtracks on that. We forget Jonathan knew anything at all, as the two of them again never interact. All of Act 1 is about Will and Robin slowly discovering that they are each gay, and then it sort of disappears for a lot of Act 2 before suddenly there's a coming out scene right near the very end where there is no space for it to feel organic or have space in the story. Season 4 set up an arc that had a lot of potential and then mostly backtracked on it until, again, trying to just paper over the cracks with one big scene. That is again what Season 4 did, a void of any proper exploration, just a couple of hints about Will's feelings that don't really allow us to sit with them so much as just subtly allude to them, occasional meaningful glances before suddenly throwing in a scene to mostly cover up the gap at the very end. Season 4 does it a lot more effectively than Season 5, but it's the same kind of structural issue at heart. And I don't know if this is true, but someone told me they didn't even plan for this scene with Jonathan initially. It was just after filming the previous scene where Jonathan did look in the rearview mirror. Because of his glance there, they suddenly thought, oh, it could be good to have a scene like this, so suddenly they wrote it in, and imagine how flat the end of this season would have been for Will and Jonathan if they hadn't had that scene. Just imagine if it didn't exist. But then the second problem here is actually something we see time and time again across every season of this show. Something that is both one of the most satisfying aspects, but also a massive problem they never really deliver on, which is how it handles people supporting each other. I've often said one of the most narratively satisfying aspects of season 1 is the slow sense of all of these disparate individual characters coming together to form a united team. The 4 kids are investigating Will, but so is Hopper, and Joyce has her own theories, and Nancy is looking for Barb, and then she ropes Jonathan in, and then all of these different parts unite and meet Elle, and Steve joins in, and it's just a great structure to have across a season, watching these different parts of the tapestry slowly form. Great narratively, but also thematically brilliant for a story all about a community coming together, essentially, an extended family coming together. No matter how weird or much of a misfit anyone might be, they can still find ground and still support each other. Therefore, Season 1 ends at a point where all these characters are now there for each other. We get a very overt scene where Nancy and Mike literally promise they're going to tell each other everything from now on.
No more secrets, okay? From now on, we tell each other everything.
Which is a great change from how distant they both were at the beginning of the season. But then, this is the expectation. This is the potential we have going forwards. These characters are going to be a united team who now can support each other, but it all just sort of resets again for Season 2. Everyone is again divided, and the season shows them again slowly coming together to once more form a team, and again promise to be there for each other much better in the future. It kind of makes sense in Season 2 because the lingering trauma of Season 1 is a big theme here. That's kind of what causes them to feel divided. It does make sense. But we end Season 2 with Hopper promising to be there for 11 more, only then in Season 3 things sort of reset again and it takes 2/3 of the story until they all unite. And then in Season 4 the same again. You know, it's not just that it gets a bit formulaic. It's more that no one ever gets proper time to actually support each other, because the whole season begins with them divided and only properly opening up to each other towards the end about whatever's been bothering them this season, at which point they can only offer a few words in a couple of scenes before promising to do more in the future, only again everything resets and they're back to square one next season. So it's only like people get to do the first step of helping each other with stuff, you know, the surface level bit. It always sets up the expectation it's going to go deeper, but then steps back again before it actually can. And for a show partly about how friends can help each other through a lot of stuff, you rarely get to see them do that. It's frustrating. So I'm not sure going all of Season 4 to just have one conversation with Jonathan that hints at the potential to be there for him more in the future, and then for that point to be completely forgotten by the time we actually get to Season 5. I'm not sure that's enough. In a way, it's also the same with Max in Season 4. She is very distant for most of this season until the running up the hill scene. With Max, it does work a lot better because it is so well written. So I don't think it's fair to criticise this at all, but it is kind of the same formula again nonetheless. Although then again, I suppose there is another 2 decent scenes where she does talk to Lucas after the running up the hill scene, so maybe they do get a bit more time to actually explore and support this. But this is still a recurring issue in the show and something they regularly fail to deliver on. Dustin is distant to everyone in Season 5 for reasons that again make sense. It is one of the stronger emotional aspects of Season 5, to which we go all the way to a moment where he finally opens up to Steve, finally gets a bit of connection, and Steve promises to be there for him more going ahead, but again, this is mostly all we see. Even though this scene happens halfway through the season and there should be more space for them after it, there's not really greater exploration. Not much support. You have one flagship moment where they break down in tears and they comfort them, and then apparently that is most stuff resolved. But focusing again on Season 4, I think the most annoying example is actually Eleven and Will, because this is an obvious space for the two of them to be supporting each other. They've been living together since moving, sharing the same classes. Will constantly witnesses Elle getting bullied, and they have so much they could relate to each other over. Why do they barely even talk? I know they weren't close in the past, but surely they'd be getting closer now. Will deserves to be a capable, valuable support here. It would give him something to do, and he deserves the same in return from, if not Elle herself, then certainly Jonathan. It's frustrating how consistently the show squanders the potential it has, and again, I do get it here. It's much more difficult to write, but that's also becoming a theme now, I think. The show's setting up something interesting, something bold and unique or fulfilling, and then immediately backtracking because it would be hard to pull off. I don't think it's just that it's difficult. I think there's also probably the invisible hand of Netflix executive pressure, and a fan favourite pressure does also play a role in preventing this show from ever really developing in any of the ways that wouldn't feel shallow. Steve is a fan favourite as a lovable buffoon, and where Jonathan is well liked, his relationship with Nancy is less idolised by the community. Therefore, they can never just quite let Steve move on. He has to exist permanently in a state of vague love triangle until the very end of the final season, and it's really, really dull. He also has to constantly have a lot of scenes with Dustin, but I can forgive that one a bit more because they do at least have engaging chemistry. But I look at season 4 and I do feel like, why is Steve still here? Why is he still in the show? Season 3 saw him stuck in a dead-end job he hated, vaguely hoping for romance with someone new, but he can't find anyone at all. Robin can only be a friend, and then he loses his job as the mall gets burned down. We never see Steve's family on screen, so they're not really a clear tie holding him to Hawkins, and he's never felt like an essential part of fighting the Upside Down either. He's always just passively getting roped into everyone else's plans because he is able to drive a car, or because he can fight kinda well. He rarely gets to bring anything greater, and I just think, in a world of narrative logic, he would have left Hawkins after the Starcourt burned down. It feels like he's outgrown Hawkins. Go to a bigger city, find a new job, a new life, meet someone new there, start a fresh Steve. I feel like he deserved a really nice, conclusive chance to say goodbye at the end of season 3, with maybe a little cameo appearance in later seasons. But obviously that was never going to happen. I expect even me suggesting that idea is causing some of you to cringe. Everyone would have rioted at the thought of Steve not being in this show, even though it makes perfect sense. Therefore, he just hangs around for some reason, with less and less steam to his character each time. I think we get a lot of that holding back this show from really committing to the interesting things it keeps setting up. And that was going to be the point I was going to make later in the video. That's the big mistake I'm talking about. Realizing you hit liquid gold with like a character or an aspect that the audience enjoys, and therefore becoming hesitant to let that aspect go or leave or even change. Let the character change, let their dynamics with someone else change, let things develop in a way that feels bold and unexpected and brave and actually substantial. I feel like the Duffer Brothers let the success of Stranger Things hinder their confidence to take risks, to actually develop in ways that weren't shallow, and it's a huge, huge shame. I was going to make that point at the end. I seem to have made it now, so I'm going to make one other point before we get to the other thing I can say for the conclusion here. Eddie is a really good character this season. His death is a bit random, but mostly quite affecting. However, it's also true that he draws attention away from our core characters, and I think serves as a stand-in character who can be killed off instead of any existing fan favourites. I mean, ironically, he did become a fan favourite once this season was out, but Eddie allows us to still have a death in order for there to feel some weight to this season and some consequence, but without losing anyone existing that we've come to know and love. I know there's a popular video a lot of you have mentioned in my comments before suggesting Jonathan should have had Eddie's arc in season 4. Honestly, I haven't watched that video. We're less than a month away from having a baby now. I just released a poetry book that you can buy from the link down below, by the way. I haven't been watching much YouTube at all recently. I imagine it's a video worth watching, and I think in theory it sounds like a great argument I completely agree with. This show has been undeniably averse to killing off anyone important. It keeps teetering on the edges of killing a character and then backtracking. We've had so many fake out deaths. I think Will, Eleven and Hopper have all at least had 2 fake out deaths each. And then when you think of characters that do die here, it's like there's Bob, there's Barb, there's Eddie, and maybe 11 at the end, but that's also still a fake out death at the same time, so that doesn't really count. It's side characters though, it's people brought in for a season who then die at the end of it. Season 4 now shows us the survival of Hopper, who is not just still alive, but somehow pretty much unaffected by months of torture and starvation. He looks a little bit different physically, but it seems to barely inhibit him, and emotionally he's the same. I think Hopper's is the most egregious fake out death of the show, because so much emphasis was placed on his death at the end of season 3. We even got a sad montage while we heard his voice reading a letter he'd left behind for 11. You know, on the one hand, this is an aspect of the show people most love it for. It's a loyalty to the main characters, let's say. It's insistence to keep them around. And I think that's probably part of the charm of this show as well. I mean, what was most vibrant about season 1 was basically just letting these kids be kids. A lot of their lines were at least partly improvised, as they were free to just babble on and talk over each other like kids do, and that brought a huge amount of charm to the show. It successfully counteracted the more eerie horror elements with some wholesome, fun, kids coming of age elements, and I think killing off important characters would probably puncture some of that feel. Plus, season 1 was a big cast. I made a video all about how many characters they introduced even in just the first episode, and yet managed to masterfully find a really good balance between all of them. One of this show's strengths is having a lot of different characters that can get to represent a lot of different aspects of society and family, and it is great even in season 4 to get a lot of different moving parts. It does still work, but there's also so many characters now that it's becoming harder to balance all of them as effectively. Some people barely get any space, sometimes the space they do get made for them feels a bit contrived, and sometimes we get really bloated runtimes to accommodate all of it. And in season 5, I think this is the biggest problem it has. Far too many characters, or rather far too many main characters that can't ever get enough space to each have fulfilling enough arcs. The big ensemble cast in that sense does represent, I think, the biggest strength of this show, but also the biggest weakness at the same time. It is the best and worst of Stranger Things, and I think it was a big mistake not to try and slim some of that down again before the finale. So, what's the conclusion? I tend to think of season 4 as something a bit like a variety show. There's a lot of different stuff, of which there will be something for everyone. There's something creepy and mysterious with all the Vecna stuff, there's something of a teen drama with 11 in California, there's the superhero stuff with the Nina Project, you got big spectacle, you've got very goofy moments, you've got D&D, stuff in the community, you've got Hopper fighting Russians, and Murray being Murray, and then obviously a good few tender moments. And I don't think it's a leap of me to suggest this was probably Netflix's plan with the series, to make it more of a big variety show that can have the widest appeal, and they succeeded in that aim for this season. If that's what they wanted, I can't fault it. I have to admire it on one level, because for any show to catch such a vast cultural fever as Stranger Things did, especially in today's climate where everything is so varied and split between so many different interests and streaming services and everything else, it is admirable. Stranger Things Season 4 felt like a huge cinematic event. Even the build-up to Stranger Things 5 still sort of did, as a result of Season 4's success. However, like most variety shows, it's also messy and too varied and too bloated to ever really hit the real heights it could. A variety show is in many ways a collection of different moments, and that's how I feel about Stranger Things more and more each season. Until Season 4 often feels like it was framed around what moments could it have, rather than how can we best tell a tightly woven story. I think this is probably also why we suddenly start getting so many monologues this season. Monologues are fine, but the problem is they do draw a lot of attention to themselves. They say, look at me, we're having a big moment here. And it's then easy as a result for them to either feel a bit unnatural or a bit formulaic, and some of the monologues do work this season. As I've said, I enjoy Jonathan's talk with Will. I have a little pet peeve for characters saying the truth is in a monologue, because it's what's always said in these monologues and it sounds so unnatural to me, but that might just be me. That might just be because it's not really a phrase people use here in the UK. It's nonetheless a good scene. Steve having a long monologue about wanting loads of little kids with all of the music and emphasis that adds to his monologue to try and make it feel very sentimental. I don't know, I don't think that works. I'm not even sure that Mike's monologue to inspire Elle particularly works. And even some of the ones that do, Henry's monologue or Victor's or Hopper's or every other similar moments, at a point there's so many it starts to kind of break your immersion. Reminds you this is a show and there's a moment designed here to try and feel big. Along with all the other idiosyncrasies we get increasingly more and more, like people finishing each other's sentences all the time or shouting Twice! And then obviously using random objects as props to explain scientific concepts. All of that stuff obviously gets dialed up to 100 by Season 5, but Season 4 does have so many big moments, and it is in general so big in scale, and the fact most of it works sets up the expectation that Season 5 is going to be even more massive, even more great in scale. And this was then, of course, something they struggled to deliver on, and I think they try to make every episode so massive, with so many plot beats, that it becomes a convoluted mess of stuff by season 5, where none of it feels big anymore. Every moment is trying so hard to be epic that they just sort of cancel each other out and become flat. Season 4 is both the high point for appeal as this massive, more general crowd pleaser of a big cultural event, but it also represents just how very messy that can be. Stranger Things is one of those shows that I think is likely to get a lot of fanfiction versions now, or else lots of video essays about how to fix it. I mean, I even made my own one of them like a couple of days after season 5 came out in my first very rushed attempt. But I think for a long time ahead, people are going to feel motivated to try and answer the question of how could this show have been better, and I think that is because it does hit both the notes of having huge potential here, but at the same time never quite delivering on that. Both of those aspects combined, I think, is what often makes fan fiction writers most motivated. And so it makes sense to end this video by again mentioning the community-driven project that I am at least very loosely involved in, called Stranger Things: The Last Door. A lot of different people coming together from the community to try and rewrite Stranger Things Season 5, and potentially even a story after that as well. I haven't been as involved as I originally wanted to be, what with having a baby and running this channel and releasing a poetry book that I am again mentioning very subtly right now. Hopefully in the future I can be a bit more involved, but either way it's still really fun to see everybody's ideas coming together, and it is still early days, but things are starting to come together. If any of you fancy joining in, their team always need more people, be that more writers and editors, or people who can help with the admin, can help running the server, people who can join the media team to help promote the project. That's probably what they need most. There are always roles to fill if you're interested, and there will be links down below so you can check that out. Otherwise, this is my video about season 4 of Stranger Things to go alongside all the other videos in the big playlist. I haven't talked about everything, obviously, like the blandness of Mike and his relationship to Elle, Robin's kind of vague shift as a character, Argyle, Joyce, whatever else. There's a lot of stuff I haven't discussed, but I think you get the picture of what I'm saying here. I really enjoy season 4. I would probably overall give it a 7 out of 10. It's got some 10 out of 10 moments, it's got some 5 out of 10 moments. I think it's a 7 overall, and I would rate it the third best season. Best to worst, my order would be season 1, season 2, season 4, season 3, and season 5. But let me know what you think on any of this stuff. Comment your thoughts, like the video if you liked it, subscribe, maybe support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee, or look at my poetry book, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Luke Core, Michael Gallagher, Emery, Faithy, TQM, Kinesthetic, Chad Bramwell, and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.